Hi, sorry for the very scary introduction. So what happened in Chernobyl is that it was the world's greater nuclear disaster. It happened in 26 April 1986. Many people are actually asking who are responsible for this incident. Again, there are many ways to criticize it. The design of the reactor, the people in power, and this is the one that I will be criticizing the most. What happened in Chernobyl was known as the world's greatest nuclear disaster. It is number one, followed by what happened in Japan, and then another one also happened in the USSR, disaster. After reading the book and watching Chernobyl, I came up with 5 ideas why it could have happened. And another YouTuber actually made a wonderful video about this. Might want to check him out. First, the demand and the strict teaching of USSR, design of reactors, the overconfidence bias,
the great USSR,
autocratic, which leads to the difference between autocratic versus democratic. Last but not least, protocols being ignored. First and foremost is demand or the strict teaching of USSR. Just get a quick background covered. Alright, the USSR and the West had a fight. It was called the Cold War because they've never actually fight like that. It's like they're husband and wife, and then they're fighting over social media. They've never actually met, but they just fight over the cloud. The reason why they do that because of technological advancement, that being is the nuclear weapons that both of them have. It was basically also the concept of communism versus capitalism. Quick background about USSR as well. USSR just got out of the era of stagnation, but that does not mean they are completely revived. They were just very, very poor. But even after that, many people who are working at Chernobyl were not being paid. Even the director himself, Burakno, when he was trying to quit, his letter of resignation was denied. He was not allowed to quit. When you're in a communist country, you can't exactly say no. So even though some of them are not being paid, these people are much more afraid of the party rather than pursuing their own liberty, life, and property. The USSR is built based on loyalty, complacency, secrecy, and egocentric. So they value loyalty so much over anything else. According to William Potter's analysis in 1990, Moscow did not appreciate the scope of accident until their own representative reached the scene.
I want you to go to Chernobyl. You take a look at the reactor, you personally, and you report directly back to me.
Wise decision, Comrade General Secretary.
The evacuation was so slow because they did not believe whatever information is coming from the ground unless their own representative came to them.
That's graphite on the roof. The whole building's been blown open. The core's exposed.
I can't see how you can tell that from here.
Even some of them were too afraid to tell them what's happening on the ground to the party and insisted that
it's just a fire. Everything is under control. All of the experts are all here.
But it wasn't a fire. Second, Moscow had a good grasp of the magnitude of the accident but gave the Ukrainian leadership discretionary power to act as it saw fit. Despite of being part of an international organization such as the UN, even the IAEA, they did not actually give out much of their information. And number 3, Moscow, to conceal the real state of affairs from the world and pretended that there was no threat to the population in and around Pripyat. The public actually were not told of what happened. They were told to go to school as per normal. It was only weeks after that they were evacuated. One of the reasons why it happened is because the design of reactors were made of cheap materials, unlike the ones in the West. Again, they just came out from the era of stagnation, so they have inadequate equipment. They have constant malfunction. Their tests are often postponed or skipped. What happened to Chernobyl is that they were running a test, and this test was 2 years overdue, and they're deprived of information transmission because how strict they are. There's a lack of communication from the top and bottom. The idea of overconfidence, bias, and illusion of control, which I will be talking more a little bit later. The nuclear facilities in Chernobyl was ahead of its time. That's overconfidence. Like Asaf actually stated, in the 30 years, there has not been a single instance when plant personnel or nearby residents have been seriously threatened. So in other words, there should not have been a nuclear explosive. But we got them! By the end of the day, they actually did not have control over their own weapon and over their own resources. Creates to what I'm trying to say, the concept of autocratic versus democratic country. And this is the concept of in-group versus out-group, which I will be talking about later on. In autocratic country, the supreme power lays on the ruler. And when that's the case, outside noises are often shut away. And this actually creates a certain kind of fear. Basically, the closer you are with the ones on the top, so it's like a pyramid, you are closer to get your policy changed the way you want to. But when you're at the bottom of the pyramid, you are kind of insignificant. Even though you're a smart individual, went to college, well knowledge, it doesn't matter. Are you close to the people above? That's how USSR was built, based on loyalty and complacency. And therefore, because of this, protocols are often ignored. Again, the test was long overdue. And second, they just got out from the era of stagnations and they had to cut down on materials. They had to be creative on what they have, which is completely different than what the West had. Basically, protocols are ignored in order to finish the job that was given. We began to ask, what are the rules or the scientists are for? From those mistakes, there are two things that I've learned about Chernobyl. What I learned about Chernobyl is the idea of truth and lies, personal responsibilities, and the fear of criticism. This concept of truth will most definitely cover the rest of my points as well. What is the truth? According to Google, so Google has most definitely spoken, the truth is a fact that can be proven to be true or false. That is different from opinion, whereby it is an expression of a person's feeling that cannot be proven. So for example, this phone stand is made out of wood. I hope it is, because if it is wrong, I would be embarrassed right now. For example, I may have seen how it was made in the factory. I've seen the process of cutting of the tree. So that's the truth. This is a fact. This thing is made out of wood. Whatever you say is your opinion. And for some reason, the truth, despite of giving the real answers of every questions that we may have been wondering, just like my homegirl Lizo said, the truth hurts.
Truth hurts, needed something more exciting.
But at the same time, the truth will most definitely set you free. Okay, let's go back to the example of Chernobyl. They just had a core explosion. It's not just any freaking mild explosion in nuclear. So this was bad. This was most definitely awful. And that was the truth. But the USSR, they cover it. They did not tell the West that they just had an explosion. They even tell to their superiors that it was just a fire. The truth was, they had an explosion. The whole entire USSR had the difficulty to accept that truth. Well, some of them may have accepted that, but they were not collectively agree on that because there was a sense of fear of their superiors, of the people who are on the top. And that makes them vulnerable. The USSR was not able to acknowledge the fact that they were exposed to their vulnerabilities and weaknesses. They're also weak because they just got out of the era of stagnations. These nuclear facilities was their only chance. I mean, they've also got another 15 nuclear reactors. So when that happened, it was a huge humiliation for the USSR. And they wouldn't want to accept help from the West or even acknowledge that they have a problem. And that is what we are seeing today. We are facing a number of countries or even individuals who are refusing to face the truth.
You can't handle the truth!
And the USSR wouldn't want to expose their vulnerabilities. Why exactly do most of us not wanting to face the truth? One being what Lizo said. I'm sure there are many other factors, but one thing that I've noticed is the idea of ego and pride, which prevent you to face constructive criticism or any criticism in general. I'm just gonna say it out loud. The USSR is probably pretty prideful. Again, quoting the fact that this is the country that do not want to be humiliated. And I don't think, as far as I'm concerned, when you're in power, you do not want to be humiliated. The New York Times came up with an article called What the Pandemic Reveals About Male Ego. The countries who are led by women are actually more successful in reducing the curve and battling the COVID-19 as compared to the male-led countries. I'm not trying to show that women are better than men or the other way around. No, I'm talking about pride here. It's basically saying that male are prone to be more egoistic as compared to women. I'm not saying there are no women who are prideful. We've got Margaret Thatcher. We know what she did. Go Google what she did. She was called an Iron Lady for a reason. You might want to check her out. But we also have got some men who are not prideful and even humble. Mahatma Gandhi, or our prime supreme example, Jesus Christ. See, I'm not saying that you have to be a man or woman or to lead. I'm saying the character trait that they are upholding, and for some reason most of our women leaders are actually able to do that. They've got this idea of like openness to criticism, openness to ideas and opinions, to how do we battle this virus together as a society as compared to the male-led countries. Again, I don't think they fear criticism, or maybe deep down they are, but they refuse to accept criticism in how to battling this virus, despite of the number of scientists, doctors, nurses who are telling them what to do, but they refuse to do it. So what is this? Like, again, there are other aspects when you are leading a country, most definitely economy or things like that, but I also want to include the idea of pride. I don't feel it is right. In order to uphold your pride, you are risking thousands of lives. Let's take my country for example. Back in the 1990s, I'm saying that like so freaking old. In every state for their economy, governments are allowed to design financial regulations to prevent the risking lending practices. And according to Haggard in 2003, but in the Asian financial crisis, this ability not only underdeveloped but not effectively enforced. Therefore, in Indonesia, during Suharto regime, any regulator who attempted to enforce prudential rules was removed from his position. Therefore, there are two individuals who are a managing director of a central bank in 1992 and a minister of finance who are about to do that. They were fired by Suharto because they were trying to do just as that. And you know what happened?
People suffering from the worst economic crisis in decades. Their anger is directed at President Suharto, whose autocratic rule in Indonesia has lasted 32 years.
I'm not saying anything, but Suharto was pretty prideful. Listen, there are other aspects why he may have said no. What I'm trying to say, if you're not open to not only the truth but criticism from other people, that is pride and that is ego. And this is what the idea of the pandemic also, that's how the USSR was pretty prideful. They were not ready to open up to the West and accept the fact that they were vulnerable and they were weak. The scale of the nuclear explosion was so massive that Gorbachev himself actually stated that the explosion of reactor number 4 was perhaps the real cause of the collapse of the Soviet Union. For example, one of the nuclear director, actually Dyatlov, any criticism that was given to him, he took that as an offense because he believed that I've been working in the nuclear facilities for many years and you dare to actually undermine my authority. Suharto and Dyatlov was kind of like in the same kind of concept, I feel, because you're not open to criticism or voice from the young generation, from the people who you have hired to help you out to find the truth. This is where I would like to go to my third point. The in-group and the out-group. For example, let's take again back to the SSR. I'm going to use the in-group as the politicians of the SSR or people of the party, and the out-groups are the scientists who are giving the voice of reason, the truth, the answer to the questions that they like to know. The USSR has a strong group polarization. They are so close as a party. Therefore, they are prone to groupthink. What is groupthink? It is the tendency to suppress dissent in the interest of the group harmony. Symptoms of a group themes are illusion of invulnerability, unquestioning belief that the group is right.
Communism is right, everybody, even though we are registered at the IAEA and never actually submitted any of our tests. We are the safest nuclear facilities in the world. Yay, Soviet!
I'm so glad they are not here anymore. Stereotyping out of out-group members, direct pressures on dissent, self-censorship. Again, a lot of people were merely a tool of the USSR. Conformity, pressure. Scientists knew what's wrong, but the thing is, they are much more afraid of the KGB agent or the USSR as compared to the nuclear explosion that they just had, and that's scary. When the thing is, you are aware of the truth, but you don't want to say it because you're afraid of being the outcast of the group. Legasov was not a nuclear physicist. He was not studying anything about nuclear. He knew about atom or something, but he was not a nuclear specialist. But one thing about Legasov is that he was a loyal socialist. And that's all they needed. The party was favorable of somebody who is loyal to the party as compared to somebody who actually knows what to do.
I'm a nuclear physicist. Before you were deputy secretary, you worked in a shoe factory.
Yes, I worked in a shoe factory. And now I'm in charge. To the workers of the world.
Legasov did an amazing job to the point whereby he actually committed to suicide for standing up what is right, for opening a way to young nuclear physicists to be involved in nuclear activities, but he was not granted. In fact, when he was standing for what he believed in, he was outcasted even by his fellow scientists. It was only when he committed suicide that people started listening about him and began to change the structure of the nuclear facilities. Yeah, they did not change it. 2 years after the explosion, the USSR barely did anything to the rest of their 16 nuclear facilities. And do we see that today? Climate change. How many scientists in the world have screamed that climate change is happening because of a man-made activity? We've just got a new article. May 2020 tied for hottest on record for the globe. You know, the funny thing is that this scientists or the people who are working for us or for these people in power, you paid them. You paid them to help you find the truth. But the thing is, you want to hear what you want to hear. Scientists, scholars, all of these studies are done to find the answers to the questions you're looking for. You're asking why the ice are melting. You're asking why we had this COVID-19 going on. We know damn well what happened with it. Do you think COVID-19 did not happen because certain 1% of the group? Sure, there are other aspects, but you cannot deny that. But you refuse to believe it. Nobody likes the truth. But that truth will set us free. Even I myself as an individual, I'm beginning to learn the idea of opening myself to my own vulnerabilities and weaknesses, and it feels so liberating. But again, this is world leaders we're talking about. Maybe a lot of are at their stakes, but I just feel like it's not fair that they are risking thousands of lives in the name of their ego because they're afraid or they didn't like that their pride are being questioned. So you wonder why history repeats itself. I know we're not seeing any nuclear attack anytime soon. We are seeing, again, same group of people with the same kind of attitude who are playing around with politics, economics, and social ideas for their own advantage. That's why history repeats itself. We are our own destruction, and that's freaking crazy, you tell me. But at the same time, we are also given the idea, if we accept that truth and accept the idea that we're vulnerable and weak as a person, that we need help. If USSR accepted the help from the US and acknowledged that they had an issue, they acknowledged that the number of deaths was not 31 but more than that, maybe they could have recovered earlier instead of risking many lives. It's really too bad because Chernobyl was the most advanced nuclear facilities and its time. Maybe it was ahead. So basically the story of Chernobyl tells me the idea of how we avoid our personal responsibility as a world leader, as people in power, in fear of criticism and being the outsider of an in-group at the expense of many lives.
I've already trod on dangerous ground. We're on dangerous ground right now because of our secrets and our lies. They're practically what define us. When the truth offends, we lie and lie until we can no longer remember it is even there, but it is still there. Every lie we tell incurs a debt to the truth. Sooner or later, that debt is paid.